To the Sideline Fantasy Football Show. These are your usual hosts, E-Rock and Crimmy. We are here to discuss we're in week 11 now already. Week 11 of the Sideline Fantasy. We are here. We are down to the last 3 weeks of the regular season. It's a very tight race for 11 out of the 12 teams in the league. Sorry, Dana. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun last 3 weeks, Crimmy. How are you feeling?
This week, okay, after what we saw on Thursday, obviously wasn't fantastic, but
No, it wasn't.
I kind of have the cards in my hand, and I kind of got to play them well enough to where I make the playoffs. I mean, things are very tight in both divisions, which even those top spots aren't locked up, so it's going to be very stressful but very fun 3 weeks.
Yeah, and these last 3 weeks, obviously, we're not going to have any trades to talk about or many additions to talk about, but we definitely will be talking about a lot of the tiebreakers we're going to be seeing because everything is so close. What it means if this person wins or that person wins. So we'll try to dissect these games for you as much as possible. We did not have a show last week. It's always kind of tough doing a show on the week of the trade deadline because if we would have done it and recorded it on Saturday like we usually do, we would have missed quite a lot of action on Sunday last week with the trades. Big names like Damian Harris, DJ Shark, Kenyon Drake, Myles Gaskin, Le'Veon, Edelman, Stephon Diggs, McKinnon, and Gordon were all traded last Sunday. And we never really talked about those guys much in the trade market, but the trade deadline is passed. I know the Diggs McKinnon for Gordon trade got a lot of slack for it, especially with Diggs being the number one receiver in fantasy. These last 3 weeks are going to be fun. That's all I got to say. There's a lot of close matchups. There's a lot of, if this person wins, you need that person to win type of stuff going on. And there's really a lot of good matchups this week, and every single game matters, and it's going to be a fun last few weeks. So let's dive into it. You ready, Crimmy? Any thoughts?
No, not really. I think you kind of summed it up pretty well. We'll kind of have to just kind of see how things play out.
All right, well, let's jump on you first. Nukem Jukem, 5-5. 27.86 points on Thursday night with Kyler Murray and D-Hop. As you already pointed out, probably not as much as you would have liked. Kyler's fine with 20. I think you could survive with that. You'd have liked a little bit more from D-Hop. Tyler on the other end, this is, 7-3, leader of his division. A win here basically settles him into the playoffs for good. He could even clinch the division this week, theoretically. Metcalf got him 12, which was a decent performance. Kirk and the flex got him 7, and his kicker got him 8. So 27-27 right now. You're projected to lose by 3. You won last week in a very, very crazy one that was kind of getting close back and forth, but you ended up pulling it out. You are 5-5. Tyler's 7-3. He could afford a loss here. Obviously wants to win, but how are you feeling heading into this one? What do you think's going to happen?
I'm feeling pretty confident. I know the projections say I'm supposed to lose this game, but I feel like my matchups are more so favorable over Tyler's just because I look at his side of things and I see Pirine there, kind of hit or miss. I see Fuller playing New England, not a fantastic matchup, obviously. Not a guarantee you get shut down by any means, but those two guys there, if you're relying on them and 3 of your guys have already gone and we're tied up, mind you, mine was a quarterback, I think that I have more of an advantage with the matchups there. It's just a matter of those guys perform. So, I'm feeling decent. I can't sit here and say it's a for sure lock, a for sure win. If Kyler maybe ran that touchdown in over Kenyon Drake, or maybe I even played Drake last week, or on Thursday, sorry. I'd feel more confident, but I got a shot still as anybody does this week.
Yeah, and I think it could come down to the Chiefs game. I really do. I think Mahomes, Raiders, Sunday Night Football, the last time the Raiders beat them, they got a little bit of a big ego running around the field as they did. I think it's going to be the difference. Does Mahomes drop 30? Does maybe Edwards-Helaire get into the action and do a little something? Ever since you made the trade for him, Hilaire's put together some not the greatest of weeks. He's been okay. So you're looking for him to kind of move forward here, but you can't afford Mahomes to get like a 35 and Helaire to get like an 8 or 9. That will not be good for you. But this is a really big game. Tyler leading Division 2 right now, holding on forward over there, while you are 5-5 in the midst of all that mess in Division 1. All right, big one there. Next up is going to be Pistol Pete's Platoon versus Fear the Herbinator. Dave at 1-5. He was probably the first team we were closest to casting off this season, is magically sitting at 5-5 with winning 4 in a row, and he's going against Peter, who is 5-5 in Division One. So again, we are in our last week. This is our last week of cross division play. After this week, everyone will have played everybody, and we have a big 5-5 matchup here. Both guys need a win. Dave projected to lose here just by 14 right now. Peter getting 16 from Hyde. He's probably pretty happy with that. What's your thoughts on this one?
You can say it's a big game for both teams. I mean, it's a pretty big swing game for both guys. They're kind of on the fringe of the playoff spots there in their respective divisions. But it's tough. Again, every week it's the same thing with me. It sounds like a broken record. Dave's relying on those Charger boys week in and week out.
And a Jets matchup too.
Yeah, they've got to. That's the thing right there. That could make or break a week. Obviously, we've said that in the past where those Chargers would make or break a week, but their matchup is very juicy in regards to playing a lackluster team such as the Jets. I mean, Herbert can go off, which means Balaj would then go off, which means then Keenan Allen probably likely goes off at the same time. So that right there to me kind of, pushes Dave's needle more so closer to the W column. I know projection wise, it's showing that Peter's going to kind of run away with this game, being projected to win by, I believe,
14
points. So that's a pretty hefty margin right there in regards to who he has. And I mean, looking at it, I honestly don't see why they're projecting him to do such a thing, just because the matchups on his side of things aren't great. They're not bad, but Brady against the Rams, Aaron Jones against the Colts, Cooper against the Vikings is probably the best thing you can find on his team right now. McLaurin against the Bengals, I think that's not
Sanders
a bad
is back.
either. Sanders is back, so I mean, they play as the Browns. I mean, the matchups there aren't awful, but there's nothing that would kind of I'd look at and say, yeah, I like that matchup a lot more than I would like a Charger boy over the Jets. I mean, it's tough to pinpoint anything on Peter's team that's bad. I'm not saying there's anything bad on his team either, but it's going to be closer than the projections actually say, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said before, it's going to come down to, do the Chargers drop 35? Do they drop 45? Do the Jets maybe hold them and the Chargers win, only dropping 24 points? A lot of it's going to come down to that, and he's not only relying on Herbert and Keenan, he's relying on the Los Angeles Chargers running game too, and Balaj, who's been kind of getting the workload there as well. I think Gurley, New Orleans is an interesting matchup. Gurley has been really dependent on the touchdown this year, very, very much so. I think he only has like 2 games with over 65 yards on the year. It's pretty crazy, maybe 3. So I think if he can get in the end zone there, obviously that makes a difference as well. Yeah, I mean, this is a big game for both teams. 5-5, Peter. 5-5, Dave. I think Dave has to win out here if he has any shot at the playoffs. I know he's won 4 in a row. He's a game back in the division, but he does not really have any tiebreakers over anybody except for Dana. So I think if Dave gets in, he still has to win out. And it's possible. It is possible, but this is a tough matchup with him against Peter. Moving on to the next one. We have good old back-to-back and back again myself versus Dana. Dana is really the only team that is out of it in this league at this point. He is 2-8, loser of 6 in a row after starting off 2-2. He's projected for 95 points. I got away with a win last week playing Tyler's. What was that? His not even his B squad. That was probably his not even his C squad. That might have been his E squad.
It's maybe E squad, maybe down to U squad. I mean, that was abysmal. So we'll just kind of forget that happened.
Either way, I needed it. I had to have it, and it's not like I put up 65-1. I did my job. But this is, again, you could look at all the games, and every game matters. But you could look at this game and say, okay, it's got the least amount of playoff indications. It's both teams in the bottom barrel. But if I win this one, Krim, I will be sitting at 5-6 heading into those last 2 games against division opponents. We don't really need to talk about Dana's playoff perspective here, but with Josh Allen on a bye, Montgomery on a bye, Darius Slayton on a bye, he's still got some guys in there that can make this competitive. The Hines-Green Bay matchup to me is really interesting because Green Bay's been horrible against the run this year. But is it possible that they do a more Jonathan Taylor approach where they're really trying to run with him more? Because, I mean, Nyheim Hines has never ran the ball much. I think last week he had more rushing yards in that game than he's had all year combined almost. So I wonder if Jonathan Taylor is a good play this week against Green Bay. But we'll see. We will see. I need this one. I have to have it. I, just like Dave, think I need to win out and get to 7-6. And based off Dana's track record lately, I might be able to squeeze a win out here. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Well, tougher than it looks, I think, for you, just because matchup wise with your big players, you've got Lamar Jackson against Tennessee, you've got Henry against Baltimore. Those guys kind of don't work well together in regards to the game flow. It would if Henry is the guy up in the game and he's kind of running the ball more so, and Lamar has to kind of get back into the game by throwing. But they could kind of work against you having those two guys. But you would hope that the game is competitive up until the point where it's not, and those guys get you what you want, and you're happy with whatever. Um, the thing with your team is that the Darrell Henderson isn't in a great matchup. Michael Thomas has been okay, but who knows how he's affected with Taysom Hill being the quarterback there. I'm going to assume that he'll still target him a fair amount, but only time will tell there. The big thing with your team, just not red flag wise, it just sticks out a little bit, is Jacoby Myers. I mean, he's been somebody who, although isn't really a household name, has been great the last 3 weeks in fantasy. I mean, 58 yards against the Bills at 11 points. The Jets absolutely cooked, didn't score that game, still had 23. The Ravens had 59, yards at 13.3. And now you're going into a stretch of games where this guy can actually be effective on your
Yeah,
roster for the next couple
that's why
weeks.
I got him.
And
I thought it was a decent pickup.
yeah, it definitely was. I mean, someone has to get the ball from Cam. This is a guy who, you know, it's kind of in the middle of where he can run those intermediate routes to those 7-8 yard routes, catch the ball and make a play. Cam likes that, but also Jacoby's somebody who can stretch the field and run downfield, and Cam also likes that. So it's the top guy there. He's been very effective as the last couple 3 weeks have shown. So getting that and as your wide receiver too, could kind of help you out a lot. I mean, your receivers have been lackluster to a point so far this year. I mean, Marquise Brown, has his games. He's either hit or miss. He's either going to, score big for you or absolutely do nothing at all for you. Missing Cole Beasley's going to be big for you too.
Yeah.
But I do think that on the other side too, Dana has some decent matchups. Like you said, Hines, Gibson playing the Bengals could be pretty solid. Chark against Pittsburgh. Juju against Jacksonville. I mean, those guys are all in matchups where they can put up points in a hurry. So I, again, think that this game will be closer than the projection actually says. I know it says only a spread of, I think, 6 point whatever. But I can see these games going down to the nitty gritty at the end of things, because you have a guy on Monday, Dana's defense is on Monday. That could be the what
Yeah.
what
And
decides.
a lot of this could be decided after the noon games. We both have a lot of noon guys going. A lot of my heavy hitters are noon. Outside of Henderson on Monday night, like you said, in his defense on Monday night, and a couple sporadic 3 o'clocks on either side. There's not much going on, so we might really know who's really in the driver's seat after the 12 o'clock games. I need that combination of Jackson, Henry, and Thomas to really do some work for me in those first slate of games for sure. And he's also got Justin Tucker in that Baltimore Tennessee game. I'm going to have my eyes glued to that Baltimore Tennessee game with Jackson, Henry, and Tucker, and Andrews all being in there in that one. Big one for me. Dana obviously trying to hold fort and salvage a little bit of pride in his season. Moving on next, we got Gotham City Rogues. Jay, loser of 3 in a row after starting off 4-3. He is in trouble now. He's probably in must-win mode, and he's going against Rob, who's 5-5, who's the highest scoring team in the league, fighting for a playoff spot all of a sudden. Rob is projected for 113. He's already got 20 via Russell Wilson on Thursday night, while Jay, on the other hand, has 17 thanks to Tyler Lockett. If I'm Jay, after Thursday night, I'm thinking, hey, if Lockett got 17, Wilson got 20, I feel decently good about that. But you got Dalvin Cook against Dallas, and I don't care who the hell else you got on your fantasy team. If you have Dalvin Cook on your team, you have a chance of scoring 120 every week because he might drop 35 or 40. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Antonio Brown does and kind of getting going more in Tampa Bay. He might be more of a factor moving forward as well. Big matchup here. 4-6. Jay probably needs to win out. Rob, on the other hand, is a game back already. If he falls to 2 back with 2 to go, he's in big trouble. Really a must win, I would say, for both teams here.
Yep, I'd agree. And I mean, again, looking at it just on paper, there are, again, some guys on each side that have a good matchup. I'd say James Conner and Mike Davis on Jay's side can kind of match Dalvin Cook. But if you're having your 2 running backs match one of his running backs, I mean, that's a pretty big hill to climb, let alone outside of those positions. So it's going to be This is one that'll be close too. I mean, it's crazy that we're this late in the season and we're having matchups where even 2-8 teams are, projected to only really lose by 6 points in matchups that are very meaningful for other teams. We have this matchup here again, very close matchup. It's a big swing games again this week. So all these games are very important. I don't really see any game this week is going to not have a big ripple effect on things. If people can kind of just squeak out a win, maybe lose by a bit. These are really going to sting one way or another for somebody.
Yeah, and especially with Rob being the highest scoring team in the league, being 5-5, being out of the playoffs right now, and he's at the highest scoring team in the league, not by like a little bit. I mean, it's by 35 points, which doesn't sound like a lot. Then it's like an 80 on the next team, so he's doing a pretty good job right now at 1197 points overall, thanks mainly to the Russell Wilson Dalvin Cook combination. But yeah, I mean it's gonna be tough. That's gonna be a tough pill to swallow for Rob if he doesn't make the playoffs this year. And Jay is gonna try to stay in it, stay in the fight. A win here puts him at 5-6. Me and him play each other week 13, and if we both can somehow salvage our seasons here, we could both go into week 7 or the last week of the regular season at 6-6, possibly fighting each other for a playoff spot. So that could be interesting as well. But that's 2 weeks ahead. We don't want to look too far ahead here. Next game up is Chad Fellers, 6-4, going against the Bare Necessities, Justin at 6-4. Again, every matchup this week is just insanely crucial, and it's crazy how that has panned out. Chad at 6-4, loser of 2 in a row, leader still somehow, some way in the division, in Division 1, but he himself said in the chat that he might have a fork put in him now. He's only projected for 83 this week. Joe Mixon looks like he could be out for the rest of the fantasy season. Allen Robinson is on a bye. His kicker only got him 3, while Chase Edmonds salvaged a 12.9. If you're Justin right now, even only projected for 97, which isn't really great in PPR, you have to be counting your lucky stars that you might be getting 4 wins in a row, going to 7-4. Justin is looking really, it's weird. It's like a turn of the tides. Justin all of a sudden is looking at 7-4, locking up a playoff spot almost, while Chad, on the other hand, could fall to 6-5, and now the bye is up for grabs in Division 1.
Yeah, it's a big matchup for sure. I mean, obviously, someone like myself or you are looking at this matchup very, very closely, along with our own, just because someone like Chad being atop the division, dropping to 6-5, he's now thrown into the mix of that tie-breaking situation where we'll go over it here in a bit, but that's massive. I mean, going to 6-5 from top of the division to now having those potentially playoff teams being 6-5, 5-6.
There could be a 4-way tie next week in Division 1 at 6-5.
And that's not what you want at this point in the season. I mean, if you're the top guy right here, it's something to kind of be worrisome about, just because getting pushed back into the mix like that with 2 weeks ago is stressful as hell. And like Chad said, I mean, his team may be done, and I have to agree with him. I mean,
having to start Madison. I mean, that's tough.
He's got other options. I mean, if you look at it on his bench, he's got Rex Burkhead, who I feel is a better option.
I would probably go Burkhead over Akers.
He's going to get some sort of, carries. Akers is even tough, man. Like, Akers has been, phased out to a degree, but Burkhead's kind of drop him, unfortunately. But he's getting a lot of looks. He's getting a lot of touches. I mean, he's kind of somebody is going to be involved at least. So unless those Vikings absolutely destroy the Cowboys to where Madison's now becoming a factor. Last week against the Bears, which was a close game, he had 4 yards.
He could have a Latavius Murray role where they give Cook a little bit of breathing room and he gets in the end zone and does something like that. But that's really what he's got to hope for to win this week's matchup. I mean, no dissing my boy Chad here. I mean, I've not performed pretty well, all that well this year either. But in this role as host, I gotta call it as I see it. I think we're seeing Chad's true team fall into place. Yep. I mean, I don't know how he's 6-4 at this point. He is. There's a chance he is the lowest scoring team in the division by the end of the season. We still have 3 weeks left. He's 5th right now, and there's a possibility he falls out at 6-7 after being in this bye position for a while. So the good thing is he's still in it till the very end because of the wins he has now. But this week is so crucial for him, and it does not look good. And I think we're seeing Chad's true colors. I think that everyone right now is in it for the bye week. And I even mean myself. I mean, a lot of people because you're in a good position at 5-5. Peter's in a good position at 5-5. Your brother as well, Trey, at 5-5. This after this week, I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves talking divisions here, but it could get really, really dicey in Division One. But Jay needs a win, or sorry, Justin could really use a win here, get 4 wins in a row, and really solidify himself going into those last 2 weeks. While Chad is treading water, no doubt about it. Let's look at that last matchup here. Trey at 5-5, lost last week in a game that was really close, 88-80. Neither game was high scoring, but I think there was an option for Trey on his bench last week to have gotten ahead of that instead of starting a Jonathan Taylor, a Brandon Cooks. He had a lot of underperforming people last week. It could have been huge. He'd be sitting at a much different spot if he was at 6-4 right now. Kyle, on the other hand, has taken that mantle of best team in the league and has run with it. 6-4, winners of 4 in a row, and he's projected for a massive 120 this week. Quarterback roulette has him with Cam Newton and a lot of good matchups. Krim, does Kyle keep the train rolling this week?
It's tough to say. I mean, I know his team is solid, and the guys he has are in good matchups, but at the same time, what we key in on it is the returns on Trey's side too, with Nick Chubb coming back. He's playing Jacobs this time around for good reason. Jonathan Taylor's in a good matchup too. I mean, these guys have they're pretty high projections. When you have a projection of 102, you feel like you're pretty safe in regards to that. But when your opponent has a projection of 120, I mean, that's something that's gonna be tough to kind of fight off. But at the same time, I mean, Kyle's team looks good, obviously, at every part that you look at. I mean, his quarterback is his question mark there, but I feel like the waiver wire has been good to him. He's been able to pick up quarterbacks that are in good matchups each week, just because there are so many, I feel like, solidified guys this year in regards to quarterbacks. I mean, you have the Mahomeses, you have the Lamars. Those guys are going to be, clear-cut guys no matter what. Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. I mean, if you look at it that way, there's not many teams who are going to be shuffling quarterbacks. I mean, you have Drew Brees, who's obviously injured now, but outside of that, if anyone was even starting him, is anybody really going to go after these guys? Not really. So the pick of the litter is there for Kyle every week, which you may be something to think about going forward if you're someone in Division Two. If you have somebody you can drop to just kind of combat that and pick up guys and stash them is something I would do personally. But giving him the pick of the litter at that point just solidify his team at the top of the lineup there. It's crazy to me. I mean, everybody else is locked in. You're not going to change your Kamara picks or
he's locked in.
Your Adams, your Hill. Like, your flex with Giovanni Bernard, with Mixon being out the rest of the year, probably just going to toss him in there. I mean, he's a pass-catching back. He can run the ball. He can do it all. So, I mean, it's tough to combat that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was probably counting his lucky chickens, not even needing to count lucky chickens at this point. He's just calling in more meat at this point after the Joe Mixon injury, getting to basically another starting running back in Gio Bernard there. I mean, his team is loaded. Kamara, Robinson, Adams, Hill, Bernard out there. And even Fant this year, despite missing as much time as he has been theoretically a tight end 1 to this point, ranked 13th in the tight ends. He did pick up Winston. I think he was going to go that direction if he was going to get the start. It didn't happen. But, I mean, let's not forget, he does have Chris Carson on his bench as well. I mean, he's got a starting running back in Bernard, and he's just going to fill Carson right in there after. I mean, it is crazy. And Trey's projected for 102. That's no slouch at all. It's just, at this point, Kyle's a behemoth at 120 projected, and his team is just so tough that Trey might have just ran into a monster at this point. But we shall see. I think Trey's kicking himself after last week. He could be 6-4 and basically be able to afford a loss here. And right now, he might be able to afford a loss. We'll see, but it's looking like Kyle could steamroll with 120 projected. You don't really see that too often. So let's take a look, Krim, at the divisions. It's getting tight. And we got to remember, too, guys, starting next week, we go to division play again. Those last 2 games are your same opponents you had the first 2 weeks of the year. So if you lost to them earlier, you could beat them now and possibly have the tiebreaker on them. The tiebreaker, just for everyone to remember, is head-to-head. And for most, that'll just be plain and simple because you play everybody once except for 2 teams. If you tie a season series 1-1, it will go to what team has the most points scored on the season, not the most points scored in your 2 matchups. So looking at Division 1, we have Chad at 6-4, facing a really tough matchup this week. Could lose that. You at 5-5. Peter at 5-5. Trey at 5-5, and then me and Jay rounding it out at 4-6. If we're going by projections here, Krim, 4 out of the 6 teams are projected to lose. The only projected winners are me and Peter this week, and let's just pretend that happened. That would put me at 5-6, Trey at 5-6, Chad at 6-5, you at 6-5, and me and you sitting there at the 3 seed. Me, you, and Trey sitting there at the 3 seed at 5-6. With me playing you next week. I mean, this again. I don't want to get too much into the what ifs here, but these last 3 weeks are going to be insanely close in Division One.
Yep. I mean, yeah, like if you look at it that way, and even losing this week is pretty tough for most people. Obviously, depending on who they're playing next week, I mean, it's pretty big to have a loss this week for you, and have to play me next week. I mean, you have to win out, like you said. So it's
And
tough.
Trey plays Chad next week, and we just talked about how weak Chad's team is. If Chad can, I think if Trey survives this week and somehow gets a win, I mean, I hate to say that the Division One leader right now is kind of a sitting duck, but if Trey can somehow survive this week against Kyle throws up a dud, Trey gets to 6-5. I think he beats Chad next week. That's 7-5. That might be enough.
Well, if you look at it too, I mean, if Chad loses and Trey loses, yes, Trey's 5-6 and Chad's 6-5. But right now, the points for is Trey's up by 2. So Trey has the points. As long as he scores more points than Chad, he can lose. As long as Chad loses as well, win that game next week, you're 1-1. You're looking at points, and Trey has that right there. So
Right.
it's a big week. I mean, obviously, a lot of it has to work your way. You want to win, but to know that you have the ability to also lose a game and still play the number 1 current team in your division and have a win that game. If you win that game and you're still separated by say 10 points, and you win that game by 15, and you got the tiebreaker at that point, you're sitting there playing week 17 or week 13. Chad's team again kind of falling off very heavily right now. As long as they lose and you lose, and you're just basing it off points, I mean, you've got many paths to making the playoffs. So it's crazy to think that, you obviously think that someone needs to be winning these games, but the fact that somebody can lose a game in week 11 and have it not affect them as much as it would normally, it's bizarre. I mean, it just goes to show how kind of muddy these waters are here in Division 1 and also Division 2. I mean, you can look at it the same way.
Yeah, and before we get to Division Two, Krim, I want you to answer a question. We got 3 weeks left in the season. It's as tight as it is. We got some trouble at the top with Chad and his injuries. What team, and you can include yourself, what team do you think is the best team in the division? Which team right now is the best team in the division?
It's tough. I would say just based off of scheduling and who you're playing going forward, I would give it to myself just because with this week, I could lose whatever, and I'm playing you, and I believe I play Trey a second time. I'm not too sure, but just the best team. I would base the best team being off of the team with the best percentages to make the playoffs. I'm not sitting here saying my roster is the best. I'm not sitting here saying I'm for sure going to go the farthest in this division, but just pure percentage-wise making the playoffs, I think I had the best shot at it just because I'm currently in the race. I play you next week, which you need to win out. I think I play Trey the week after that. So I'm still playing another playoff team, and the things don't really get too complicated for me at that point. Outside of myself, though, I'll still give you another one here. I would probably say it's tough. I would say it's between Peter and your team in regards to the teams I would feel more confident in going forward. I mean, if you look at Peter's team, he's playing high this week. Yeah, obviously that sucks for, him not having that person going forward. But your roster is Aaron Jones, you have Terry McLaurin, you have Amari, you have Darren Waller. You get back Miles Sanders again. You don't really have the depth, but getting Diggs back after a bye too, and telling me that your running backs are going to be Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, your receiver is going to be Cooper McLaurin, and Stephon Diggs moving forward. Your tight end is a pretty solid tight end. I mean, again, if you can get into a spot where you don't have to fiddle with things, you can play those guys. If they play well, cool. If they don't, they don't. It's tough at this point in the season to have to make those decisions based off matchups. And if you can avoid doing that entirely, you're sitting pretty comfortably.
Yeah, and I'll throw my 2 cents in here real quick. I actually think the best fantasy football team right now. It's close, but I think it's crazy to say this because I think this team's going to go to 5-6 this week and possibly not make the playoffs. And I honestly think your brother's team's the best team. I think if you really look at his team right now, and it's crazy to think that he might lose this week, be 5-6, and I think Deshaun Watson. Okay, you got quarterback number 7, so you got a top 10 quarterback. You got Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs came alive last week. Oh, by the way, everyone's been talking about him struggling. He's the number 5 running back in fantasy. You got Nick Chubb, who's missed some action so far this season, but when he's been on the field, he's been nothing but great. And then you got Brandon Cooks, who's been a little struggle at times, but he's also had some big weeks. But you got Claypool, who's receiver 17. You got Jared Cook, tight end 19. You have page popped up. Hold on. You have Jonathan Taylor, who could get something going this week. You got Kareem Hunt on your bench. You got Robbie Anderson, who's receiver 12 on your bench. A.J. Brown, tough matchup this week on his bench. I honestly think Trey is running into a really tough situation. He's going against Kyle. He might lose, but I think your team is second closest. And I think the reason I say that is I think you have a lot of good matchups this week. You should win it. And Mozart coming back next week could be a difference maker. Right now, you're trying to play that second RB, Kerryon Johnson. What do you do? Type of situation. I think Raheem Mozart coming back next week, or at least even having a Gaskin coming back soon, will give you a little bit more comfortability there because that Murray Hopkins combo can oftentimes be just too much to handle. So I really think the Charles brothers right now have the 2 best teams in the division, and we'll see if either of them even end up making the playoffs. It's that close. But let's look at Division 2 real quick. Crimmy, you have Tyler at 7-3, Justin at 6-4. Kyle at 6-4, winner of 4 in a row. Rob, leading point getter in the league at 5-5. Dave staying alive at 5-5 as well. Dana out of it at 2-8. Again, Dave, lowest scoring team in the league, is in it at 5-5 with a winnable game this week. Rob, highest scoring team in the league, is on the outside looking in. What are the odds? I know we still have 3 weeks left, but with how good Kyle's team is, Justin looks like he's going to get a win this week against Chad. I mean, what are the odds that we have that we could have 3 teams at 7-4 next week? And what are the odds that there might be too much separation for these 5-5 teams to catch up?
Pretty good. I mean, obviously, I don't want to see 3 7-4 teams just because one of them is playing me this week. Sorry, I do want to see that. I do want to see that. That's my mistake. I do want to see 3 7-4 teams for sure. But I mean, it's tough. If you're in that situation and you're essentially 2 games out with 2 to go, it's going to be very hard for all 3 of these teams to lose the next 3 games just because I'm sure at one point or another, I don't have the schedule in front of me, they're going to play each other. So one's going to win. One has to win. There's no way they tie, and somehow, some way that happens. But even a tie wouldn't really help anybody who's at 5-6 in that second division there. So they have to hope that these guys lose for sure. And if they do, I mean, you have Tyler at 7-4, Justin at 6-5, Kyle at 6-5, and Rob and Dave, snatch a win. They're 6-5 too. Yeah, again for Dave, he's kind of at the bottom of that, pile there at 6-5, unfortunately for him. But that's really the only way for Dave to make it, and for Rob to have a good chance at everything.
Yeah, and my thing too is, in the beginning of the year there was a stretch where I thought 7-6 might get into Division 2. I think it's 8-5. I think 8-5 is going to be getting in. Tyler might finish 9-4, wrap the division up. Hell, with how good he started, again, even if there was 3 7-4 teams or 2 7-4 teams at the top, he has the tiebreaker almost over every team in the division at this point. So he's got a decent schedule moving forward. I think Tyler finishes 9-4, 10-3. But when you go to Justin and Kyle here, Kyle's on a roll looking like he's going to win this week. Justin playing against Chad. They're both likely 7-4 this week too if we hold on to projections. So I think Rob and Dave are in must-wins the rest of the way. And I think based on what we're going to see, I think we're going to see Tyler at 9-4, Justin and Kyle at 8-4, possibly 9-4. Let's not count Kyle out of this division yet. His team's coming. But Rob and Dave are in a really tough spot. I know it's only a game out, but I think they both have to win out, get to 8-5, and have a tiebreak over someone, because even Dave does not have many tiebreakers over anyone in his division at all. So, man, is it going to be close? And I'll ask this question as kind of a roundup. Same question I asked for the Division One. Who is the best team in Division Two? Is it Kyle? Is that a unanimous decision? Or are you
Is
going to give Tyler the benefit of the
is it
doubt?
really a question though? I mean, if you look at just pure players, of course it's Kyle. I mean, you have Alvin Kamara. You have, your two of your running backs are essentially, top 8 guys. You have 2 top 10 receivers. I mean, is it really a question? I mean, it's difficult to find somebody on this team right now just by clicking on it. Like, can you really find somebody that's in those, positions? Like, you have RB1. Like, those guys, it's very hard to find anybody outside of a top 10, RB3. I mean, Devontae, again, here, he's one receiver 2. Tyreek's probably up there, receiver 3. I mean, those are just your key guys. Not to mention, you have Chris Carson, who's missed a couple weeks, is RB21 still, and he hasn't played in a month. So to sit there and think that any other team is better than this team is absurd to me.
Right.
And looking at the way it lays out too, I hope it changes very much so. But that's the team. If I don't get that bye, I'm playing, week 1 of the playoffs. So I really hope things do shake up.
Yeah, and like I said, don't count anyone out of the division yet. Tyler is in a good spot with the tiebreakers he has and kind of that 1-game cushion right now. And with who, that's why that game again with you and him is huge, because not only could he, fall into tie first place in the division, you could jump up in a tie for first place with a win in that game. You and Tyler's game has a lot going on at the top. But I agree, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a wild finish. This has been a really fun season to this point so far, and we're going to keep rolling with it. So it's going to be a fun one. The playoff bracket is where it's at right now. You got Chad in there falling fast, possibly. Tyler getting a bye as well. You have the Bear Necessities and Peter matching up, and then obviously, like you said, you and Kyle at this point matching up as well. So I'm sure at this point next week we'll even be breaking down the matchups even more with how close it is. So with that being said, we want to thank you guys for tuning in to the show. Been a fun season so far. Let's have a fun rest of the way, last month or so of the season, and have a good football weekend. Later.